Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us. This is our Improve Your IELTS Speaking Score webinar. Joining us for the second time in webinar series history, but for the first time as host is IELTS expert Rochelle van der Meer, who is here to discuss everything you'll need to know about the speaking test section. We'll cover everything from question types and tasks to what exactly examiners look for when they're scoring your test, as well as covering some common myths and misconceptions. We'll finish with about 15 minutes worth of questions where Rochelle will provide some answers. So make sure you're asking your questions in the comments or tag a friend who might have some questions for us about IELTS speaking. Without further ado, I'm super happy to hand over to you, Rochelle. Hello and welcome.
Hello there. Thank you, Sam. Oops. So, hello everybody. As you heard, my name is Rochelle and I've been with IDP for 12 years. So I am very happy to work as an IELTS speaking coach and expert at IDP, and I hope that I can share some of what I've learned through all these years with you to help you improve your test score. All right, so now we will look at how to gain some practical speaking tips, and we'll also talk about how you'll be scored so you can understand how these band descriptors work, and then also on how to avoid costly mistakes. So first of all, what's very unique to IDP is that you can choose between academic or general training. And now that you have these choices, you don't always have a choice, but if you do have a choice, you probably wonder which one you need to take. Most of you have probably taken the academic test. And the academic test is usually when you want to go and study, get a visa to study somewhere. But if you do have the choice, then, for example, if you choose the general training, that's usually a good choice if you are in a job like IT or engineering, where you work a lot with numbers, but you want to show your English literacy skills. So a good way to show that you would be able to choose general training, because in there, when you choose general, you'll be able to show your literacy, show your vocabulary skills, your literacy skills better. Okay, so also this seminar will focus on test takers who already have some sort of good base in English, and we'll look at scores from 6 and above. Now, okay. So if you just bear with me, I'll just wait for this. So ideally, you need to practice your English every day. Now, when we look at the speaking test, some people ask, what is the difference between the academic and the general for a speaking test? Well, the good news is there's no difference in the speaking test for whether you're doing general or academic. It's the same. You don't have to change the way you are doing it for the speaking. It is exactly the same, at the same times, in the same format. Now, I just hope you can see this clearly, because let me just double check something. I think because my screen was acting up a little bit. Thank you for bearing with me. So with our speaking test, it is face-to-face. Okay, so you get to do this face-to-face with your examiner, and whether it's computer-based, your test, or whether it's paper-based, you still see the examiner face-to-face. In Melbourne, where we had the pandemic, and we're still dealing with opening times and less restrictions, at the moment, we are still doing it via Zoom. The test taker, goes into the office. You will go in there to the test room. Everything will be set up for you, but the examiner would be on a Zoom screen just to minimize contact. it will slowly open up again. So for now, just know that it will still be with a human being. And the advantage of that is that computers cannot read anxiety really well. If you are nervous or anxious, that's why you need a human, such as the examiner, to just take you through this. Now, there are 3 parts. Parts 1 and 2 would all be me. It will all be about you. And part 3 would be general. So when we ask you any questions in part 3, ideally, we want to see whether you can have a 2-way conversation, but we will test how generally you can speak. Think about it like a philosophy class. You will sit there, and if you can only use very basic English, you'll be saying things like, my favorite food is chocolate. But the more generally you can speak, the broader your range of language, right? So that's what we'll be testing as well. So just go with that in part 3. Part 1 is just very basic questions about what food you like, where do you live, all sorts of general, straightforward questions like that. We just want to see if you can share some basic information and try to tell us why you like things or why you don't like things. You don't have to go into a lot of detail, but it truly does help just to share a bit about that in part 1. And in part 2, we'll give you a topic, and that is just to see whether you can prepare a short presentation, just a short little talk with us. So that's what part 2 is about. And part 3 will go deeper into what you were talking about, but in a generalized way. So yes, this is just to check your English speaking skills in a conversational manner. Okay, and overall, it will be 11 to 14 minutes. And you don't have to worry about the times in each part. We will be keeping the time. All you need to do is show up. We'll give you the pen, the paper, and we will do the time. We might rush you sometimes. We might interrupt you. Don't panic about that. Please don't. That is just us getting you through it. Because if you speak too much, you might get mentally exhausted. And if you speak too little, we won't get enough language. So our job is just to get you through this. So we might interrupt you here and there. It's not because you've done anything wrong. Okay. So now we are going to just talk about how we assess you. Okay, so as you can see, I've got my little crumply little copy here, but you should all have this in your packs. It's the speaking assessment criteria, and it's actually very simple. What we basically, when you book a coaching session, for example, I can actually tell you exactly which parts apply to you and which parts not. But you can try and do this at home as well. So we have 4 parts. It's divided into 4 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. That is how we assess you. All right. And we have to give you a score out of 9 for each of these 4 parts. So, and then we take those 4 scores and we mush them together. Basically, we have to give you the average of those 4 scores, and that will be your final speaking score. But it's not 100% mathematical because this is still a language-based test. So, for example, if you get a 6666, you'll be a 6. If you get a 6667, you'll still be a 6. If you get a 6677, you'll be a 6.5. If you get a 6777, mathematically, you should average out to a 7 now, but because this is a language test, you will still be a 6.5. The only way to get a round number, a nice round number, is to either get all 7s or get an 8 somewhere if you're getting a 6 somewhere. So for example, 8776, then that 8 would compensate for that little 6 down there, and it will all average out to a 7. And that's how it works for most things. So your strengths are actually in some ways sometimes more important than your weaknesses. You don't see an athlete use their bad arm or their bad leg. They all use their best arm and their best leg in the competition. And that's what we need you to do. Okay, so, oh my goodness, now this. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how you will be scored. Just as I said, we'll be looking at your 25% of your score will be fluency and coherence. Fluency is how do you speak too fast? Do you speak too slow? Do you speak like a car that's stopping and starting, stopping and starting? Or do you speak at a nice even speed? Like I hopefully am right now, but that's what I mean. So we just want you to speak at a nice even speed, but it doesn't help, you're speaking at this nice even speed, but you're making no sense. You have to make sense. You have to stick to the point. Keep us on board. So that's where coherence comes in. You need to be able to make sense. If you are not coherent and you're not making sense, that could affect your point quite badly. So we need you to be fluent. And how do you make things fluent? You use words like and, so, because. And if you only say and, so, and because, that's quite limited. But if you can use a wide range of, if you look at, for example, in a 6 under fluency and coherence, if you do have your notes handy, you'll see in the second point of a 6, it says uses a range of connectives and discourse markers. And that's what those things are, little fillers, and, so, okay, those sorts of things. Please don't say anything like what you call that or something. Just say, oh, I can't think of the word, or to give me a bit of time, but just make sure you're using correct English for this. Then another part of the score will be your lexical resource. That is vocabulary. So how many words in English do you know? So for a 6, we need you to speak about familiar and unfamiliar topics with ease. You don't want to struggle there. And then for a 7, we need you to show us some fancy language, okay, and hopefully an idiom or two. And then for an 8, we need you to really show us some fancy language, some more sophisticated language. I'm making this very simple in the way I'm explaining, but we need some really sophisticated language for an 8. And if you look at a 7, the third point under lexical resource, in a 7, it says generally paraphrases successfully. Paraphrases, if you don't know how to say something in English, but you want to say, you still want to say it, but you may be saying it in a clumsier way or a more poetic way, it's okay. You're allowed to get creative as long as we understand what you mean. So for a 7, you can paraphrase as long as you use sophisticated language as well, a good mix. But for an 8, less paraphrasing, more sophisticated language. Okay, and in a 9, they don't even mention paraphrasing. So now grammatical range and accuracy is another part of your score. And that is basically, do you use more than one tense? Please use a few tenses, and that's good. That's different forms, right? And then complex structures. That is, for example, I like your dog, present tense, but it did bark at me this morning. 2 different tenses put together in a complicated way. Or what if we went to the shop but did not buy anything? It's just these ways of putting things together. If you can do those basic things, that's a 6 and above. And if you make maybe 100 million mistakes, but you're not confusing us regarding where you are in time or changing the meaning too much with your mistakes, it can be a 6 and above. But if you make like 100,000 mistakes, obviously not exactly, but if you make less mistakes, we're looking more at a 7, and an 8 is a different kind of thing altogether. We don't want you to repeat the same mistakes again and again in an 8. Right, so, but you're still allowed to make some mistakes, even for a 9, but we'll get into more detail about that later. And then finally, pronunciation. Pronunciation is really influenced a lot by fluency. There are some features that are influenced by fluency. If you're not very fluent, it will affect things like rhythm. It will affect things like word grouping, but we'll get into more detail. Pronunciation is how clearly you are speaking and also your accent can be a factor as well, as long as we can understand what you are saying. It doesn't matter if you have a strong accent. You can have a very strong South African accent, which is where I am from, by the way. English is my second language, so I understand what it's like learning a different language. But as long as we understand what you are saying, your native tongue is not distorting what you are saying. We are listening with an international ear. Accents are welcome, right? Okay, now let's listen to this person. We're going to listen to this person just to kind of hear, and then we'll discuss the details. Okay. Hopefully this video is going to work.
Now, we've been talking about a well-known person you like or admire, and I'd like to discuss with you one or two more general questions related to this. Let's consider, first of all, famous people in your country. So in China, what kind of people become famous?
Politicians, the pop stars, and sports stars. It's similar with the other countries, I think.
Is one of those groups more popular than others?
It depends, because for politicians, you have to know them because they appeared all the time on the televisions or newspapers. But for some pop stars, because it's especially famous for the young people, because the young people to follow the stars and the new trends. But for sports stars, they mainly become famous during some Olympic games or some competitions. So it really depends. Yeah.
What about in the past? Were those same people famous in the past? Politicians, sports stars, and pop stars?
I think so, because even I have talked with my parents at their age, and when they was young, they also follow some pop stars and the sports stars, and for the politicians, they change quite often. So yeah, they're also famous. Yeah.
And how about the future? Where do you think it's going to go?
I think this kind of people will remain famous in the future. This type of people, because we still have lots of new pop stars, sports stars, and some new politicians. But I think some other people will join them as well. For example, notice some entrepreneurs. For example, the founder of the Facebook, he's famous for everyone. Even some not weird but strange people like the founder of the WikiLeaks. He's also popular because the things has done. So I think this kind of new a rising group of people will join the famous people in the future.
And do you think technology is going to be the place where many of our famous people come from in the future?
Definitely, because I think notice most of people use the Facebooks, the Twitters, so definitely this kind of website or the new technology will help to make people famous. And I think many people are working on it because there are special companies to make these people famous through the internet, the advertisement or the promotion. Yeah.
Now let's talk about celebrity culture. Often famous people are used in advertising.
Yep.
Can you give me some examples of that?
Well, it's quite often, we can see lots of famous people on the television. For example, one typical example is the Michael Jordan, because he is actually, when the first time the Nike become very famous, it's because Michael Jordan, because he is the first, he's the first NBA stars, to sign a company to, have the, serious commercials for specific companies. And I think that's a typical example, how the famous people to help the company successful, and also the company use his money to make the stars become more famous. So I think it's, yeah.
And that example you're talking about with Michael Jordan, he's a basketball player who is promoting a product that he was personally involved in producing. What about celebrities who endorse products for which they have no personal connection?
Yeah, it's quite often because people are profit oriented. Because we can see lots. I think for some makeup production, we can see lots of famous female stars. They just say, okay, this one's so good, it's fantastic. Nobody know whether she has used it or not. I think sometimes it depends on this is ethnic choice. Someone they really try it and use it and then say, okay, this one's fine, it's good. So we can rely on it, but some of them just want to get the money. So it's just do the promotion stuff without really using it or testing it.
Now, how about our young people? how might famous people or celebrities have a negative impact on our young people?
Well, as we know, some famous people is not that good. I have to say, I cannot say that immoral, but the actions they have done is really bad. The example for the young kids or the young generation, because some of them once they become the famous, they just try to drugs, have stay in the clubs, all day, not all day, but all the night, and definitely, young people sometimes cannot distinguish good things or the bad things. Sometimes they just follow the star's actions. So it makes, some of them just, say, it's pretty cool thing, to try some drug because that star is trying it, or many stars are trying it. Or it's pretty cool, to stay with girls all the time, different girls all the time, some might, idol, he's doing the same thing. So I think it's pretty bad negative effects on the young people.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's the end of the speaking test.
Thanks.
Right, so okay, so let's see what Brian did here. Okay, so here's a 6. Let's see why we are saying he's a 6. So first, let's look at his fluency and coherence. He gives us extended responses. That's great. That's, if you look at next fluency and you look at a 6, the basic requirement for a 6 is willing to speak at length. Okay, so that's great. We don't have to beg him to give us some language. He is doing that. He's got a reasonable range of linking words. He says things like, for example, actually, as a result. Then he also uses grammatical constructions well to introduce ideas. He says, by having a hobby, by doing sports. So that's good stuff. But he is not always making sense. Sometimes it feels like I'm doing a lot of work just to follow him. He's got a bit of a lack of coherence because of hesitation and repetition. And he overuses some of these fillers. He says, well, like, cause, yeah. And we'll get back to the words, yeah. Okay, a popular one, yeah. Now, lexical resource. His range is enough to discuss topics at length, right? He can talk about familiar and unfamiliar topics, which is a basic requirement for 6. He does that with ease. And okay, he's using some less common expressions and collocation. For example, get on very well with each other. You know what I meant with fancy language and sophisticated language. And he says, increase money for charity, good for community, develop country psychologically, physically. So that's good. He's using some unusual words, nice words. But he is sometimes unaware of register or style. He uses too informal words like gonna, wanna, and remember I mentioned yeah? Now, when you are speaking with the examiner, we don't want you to do it like a job interview or a newsreader or something like that, not too formal. We are still seeing how you would go in conversational English and how well you can express yourself in English. That is the point of this test. We need to see if you'll be able to deal with being in an English-speaking country. The kind of English we want you to use should be applicable to an audience that would consist of people from 16 years old to 90 years old. So you can't get out all your swear words and your, very casual language there, but you also can't go too formal. You have to use a kind of English that would keep a lot of doors open. Okay, so we can't go too casual over here, and he may have done that a bit. All right, so let's look at grammatical range and accuracy. Now, he does use a range of structures, and then he uses simple and complex sentence forms. But when he uses complex sentences, he does make quite a lot of mistakes, a lot. So he would say, they just want to get big car, big house, and that's the reason that forces them to work very hard than before. But the meaning is clear. We are not lost. We are not getting lost with what he's doing. So that keeps him in a 6. All right. Otherwise, if he did lose us on that, the meaning, then we probably would have hit 5. Pronunciation. He's generally clear. He uses some stress and intonation. He does not speak like a robot. And it does not sound like he's shouting all the time. He's, he's using some nice intonation, but unfortunately, generally there's a bit of a flat intonation as well. And the rhythm is a bit mechanical. I think it's part of his, if you listen to how he hesitated and how he repeated things, it did sound a bit mechanical and less conversational. See how the two influence each other. And then there were some words that were mispronounced, where we lost some clarity. For example, he said whale, which is actually while, and whale means crying, okay? So we kind of lost the meaning there. And he said leer instead of leisure. Louts for lots. So there you go. Okay, but we mostly understood him. Okay, now let's look at Alexandra. She's a typical 7. She's from Colombia. Let's see why she's a 7.
So we've been talking about a well-known person that you like or admire, and I'd like to discuss with you 1 or 2 more general questions related to this. Let's consider, first of all, being in the public eye. Yeah. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of being famous?
The advantages are that first that you will get really rich, and the fame actually it helps you because you don't have to pay for a lot of stuff. They will give you free dresses and free stays in the hotels, free meals, free everything. So actually you're saving money plus the money that you're earning. And the disadvantages are that being a public eye, you lose your privacy. You will always be in the eye of the paparazzi and the people, and if someone recognizes you, they will take a picture of you, and that's the end of the relaxed evening. So I think that it will be a really big disadvantage.
Do you think if a celebrity accepts those endorsements, do you think they lose their honesty?
I don't think that they will lose their honesty, but maybe it will change them. They will have to accept the environment that they are living into right now. So if they get famous and they're not selling their soul to the devil, I don't think that they are that bad. I think that it's just human, and if they like it, well, better for them.
Can you talk about how the media reports on famous people in your country?
The reports of the media in my country, they are like having half serious news and half entertainment. So the reports are often, but not that often. They don't have like big news if Shakira gets married or not. It's like a small news, but it gets bigger with the people, not with the media, because people start to talking about the news, not the media makes it big.
Do you think more time should be spent on current events and political news?
I think so, but I think that we also need a rest from the serious stuff, and we also need entertainment. So it will be a balance, because only bad news is not good for anybody. So I think that half and half it will be better.
Why do ordinary people find the lives of celebrities so interesting?
I think because if they see somebody that successful and rich failed or getting dumped or in jail, I think that we feel better about ourselves, because we think, okay, we might not be rich, but we are better than them. So I think that's why we like it so much, to see that kind of news.
So you think most people want to see that celebrity fail?
Maybe, or maybe depends. If you don't like anybody, you will like them fail. But if you really support one person, you will like them to be like really successful.
Let's talk about celebrity culture. How does the media use famous people in advertising?
In a lot of ways, because if people follows one person, for example, Justin Bieber right now in the Super Bowl, the media will use it and publicists will use him as long as it takes, because if he's famous, their money return will be really high.
Do you think people want to buy a product because the celebrity endorses that?
It depends of the target, but if it's a smart target, it won't be happen like this. But if it's like a child or teenagers, they will follow anything if their leaders does it.
You mentioned Justin Bieber. Are there any negative effects of young people becoming famous?
Maybe not for the people that follows the famous people, but I think that it will be really bad for that poor guy. It's being famous at that young age. You don't know what is good and what is bad, and they will always turn bad.
Thank you very much. This is the end of the speaking test.
All right. Okay, let's see what is going on with Alexandra. Now, her fluency and coherence was pretty all right, wasn't it? So she was quite fluent. She gave us extended and appropriate answers. So, we got a lot of information there, which is good. She used a good range of those markers and linking words. She said things like, first, actually, I think so. For example, in a lot of ways. Now, she did have some hesitation. And when it comes to hesitation, what's acceptable for a 7 is if you hesitate, you don't hesitate that much, but you are looking for the English words. So if you look at the 7 under fluency and coherence, it says in the second bullet point, may demonstrate language-related hesitation at times. And that means, you are looking for the English words. How do you really express this? But if you, for an 8, it's more about you don't quite know what to say about the issue because you don't know much about the issue. But if you can explain to us in English why you don't know much about it, that's acceptable as well. Because remember, this is not an IQ test. We are testing whether you can express yourself in English, how well you can. So in whichever situation you find yourself in your new country, how will you deal with these situations in English? So with her, with Alexandra, she did hesitate, but mainly when she was just trying to explain her ideas, and that's what you've got to get stuck sometimes. Lexical resource. Now, that is a main strength. She really had a good use of language. She had a wide range. She used some less common and idiomatic and colloquial language, which she said, lose your privacy, selling their soul to the devil, getting dumped. That was pretty impressive and a very strong feature of hers. Then grammatical range and accuracy. So when we listened to Alexandra, we could see that she used a good range of simple and complex structures. She used them flexibly, and many of the sentences were error-free. But if you want an 8, the difference between what makes or breaks an 8 and what gives you a 7 is we don't want you to repeat the same grammar mistakes again and again. We don't want the issue to be systematic. So if I'm listening to you, for example, and I'm going, oh, you just broke a grammar rule. And I'll go, it's all right. It's okay. It's you can still have a 9. You're probably just nervous. Oh, you just broke the same grammar rule again. Okay, maybe an 8. Oh, hold on. You just broke the same grammar rule again for the 3rd or 4th time. Maybe you don't know the rule, or maybe you just have a bad habit there, but you keep making the same mistake again and again. And in an 8, if you look at the second point under grammar, it says in the last bit of the second point, basic non-systematic errors. And Alexandra, she did make some systematic errors with articles, kept coming up, prepositions, subject, verb agreement, and verb tenses. For example, if someone recognizes you, it's actually if someone recognizes you. If people follow, you will like them fail. and it won't be happen like this. So, ooh, okay, so that's not acceptable from 8, but she didn't make that many mistakes. So let's look at pronunciation. Look, she was clear and easy to follow, and the stress in intonation was nice. It was used well. It was very pleasant to listen to her, warm and friendly. But she did have some problems with some sounds where she would say jong instead of young. But I could still understand her. At least we could still understand her. So a 6 is if you can show us that you're aware of the features. A 7 is maybe all the good things from a 6, but maybe 2 good things from a 7, from an 8, and an 8 is just all the good stuff from an 8. So yes, that's a 7. So in a 7, we want some good spoken English, but you're still allowed to make quite a few mistakes. You can still draw some attention to your mistakes. That's acceptable for a 7. Okay. Now, let's listen to our final test taker. That is Kush from India, and this would be a good example of a band 8.
Now, we've been talking about a well-known person who you like or admire, and I'd like to discuss with you one or two more general questions related to this. Let's consider, first of all, being in the public eye. Famous people are watched by everybody. What are the advantages and disadvantages of that?
Okay, the advantages is that a lot of people watching you, so you become famous, and there are a lot of things which you can do correctly and politically right, because there is media watching you, and you can go ahead and pass the message to the media in a right way. The disadvantage is that you have to be diplomatically correct. At times, if there are certain things which are incorrect, still you have to go ahead and do that, which doesn't make sense, because there are a lot of political leaders, they are into corruption back in India, and at times, there are some things which are wrong, but they have to do it.
Why do they have to do it?
Because there's a lot of political pressure, and if they don't do it, the political party would not support them, and in the end, they have to resign.
Do you think the media plays a role in that? What is the media's approach to reporting what famous people do?
Well, media plays an important role. At times, media will actually show things which are not correct, or if you see it, it looks like he's wrong, but that's not the case. So media plays a very important role. They portray in a wrong manner at times, and sometimes they do portray in a right manner.
Can anything be done about that, do you think?
Not really, because in today's world, what has happened is everything is communicated by media, television, news, internet. So you just have to go ahead and probably call the media and do a meeting and answer questions to the public and give justification and reasons.
Very often the media reports on the most trivial things in important issues, but people are fascinated by those things. Why are people fascinated by it?
Because these days people like to listen to gossip and trivial things. They're not interested in the bigger part, what's happening. They have a simple life. They would like to live it their way. They are not bothered what is happening within the country. There are only few people you see are really interested in knowing about the country and getting all the information and reacting.
Let's go on and talk about this celebrity culture. How are famous people used by advertisers nowadays?
Famous people are really used for advertising because, one, they can promote the product, and two, there are a lot of fans. They're fans. So obviously, if they are using that product, what will happen is those fans will actually use that product. And of course, it's a money-making business. I mean, if Mahatma Gandhi wore a watch of Swatch, I would wear it.
You would wear it?
Yeah, I would wear it. I was like, oh, he wore it, I'll wear it.
The use of famous people in advertising and other things, do you think that has a negative effect, especially on young people?
At times, yes. There are some of the advertisements which are not meant or not, they are offensive to younger generations. So at times, yes.
Do you think that famous people can influence public opinion beyond just selling things? They can make people vote differently or believe other
Yes,
things?
they can. They influence a lot of people today. Even cricketers or any kind of famous personality, they influence the public, to do things.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm fine with that as long as, at times I do like, but then at times I don't like, so I don't bother much.
All right, well, thanks, Kush. That's the end of the speaking test.
Thank you.
There you go. Okay. Now let's see what's going on with Kush. What was it? Have band 8. So she was very fluent, and her responses were long and detailed. Her hesitations were not to look for language. It was more content related. She was more looking for, oh my goodness, what else can I say about this thing? Okay, so there's a big difference in that. And then she used fillers like I mean, natural linking words and markers. That's not the case. I'm fine with that. So that went well. Then we are looking at lexical resource, her vocabulary. She used a wide range of vocabulary, which she used flexibly and precisely. And she used good examples. She said political pressure into corruption, today's world, promote the product, a money-making business. She did have some rare errors in word choice. For example, do a meeting that was a bit clumsy. So little things like that could keep her from a band 9, but she didn't do it often enough to make her go to a band 7, because a band 8 is where you draw less attention to the mistakes you make and more attention to what you are saying. So you'll find that in Australia, for example, we want teachers and lawyers to get a band 8 for the reason that they need to present to a class on a weekly basis or a courtroom. And the last thing people want to focus on is the mistakes they're making when they're speaking. They want to focus on the content of the lesson being presented or the content of the case being presented. That's what an 8 means. As I said before, 7 can still draw attention to mistakes. That's okay. And that's more required for the medical industry, because you don't care if your doctor makes grammar mistakes, but you care more whether your doctor understands you, or the nurse or the psychiatrist or the social worker. Wherever the public's mental or physical health is in someone's hands, that's usually a 7. But this is more presentation style, an 8. Okay, so grammar. Now, she used a wide range of grammar structures accurately. And for example, she said, what will happen is those fans will actually use that product. She did make some rare errors. The advantages is interested in the bigger part, what's happening, but she didn't repeat them that much. So they were quite rare, these errors. As I said, it didn't draw much attention. Now, pronunciation, because she was so fluent, her rhythm was great. Stress and intonation was great. Sorry, that's my dog. And she used it well to reinforce meanings, like at times I do like. And it's when you're going to storyteller mode, when you almost like you're reading a book to a child, when you are sharing something with someone, it's different from as opposed to just trying to get the speaking test over and then run, hoping the examiner could work with that. The best is to share, because then you'll focus more on whether the person who's listening to you, which is the examiner, is getting the meaning, instead of worrying so much about your own mistakes. It changes because you use your tone and your rhythm and the stress in a much more productive way. Okay, so she did have some minor problems with word stress sometimes and the sound. Word stress is, for example, you say beautiful, you say beautiful, beautiful, or beautiful. That's word stress. But sometimes she mucked around with that a bit, and the sound like the or whatever, but not in so many times that it lost meaning. Okay, so now before we head to questions, just a bit of advice before we go. Remember to listen, read, and think in English before the test. It really helps. Okay, so listen to the radio. And if the radio is too depressing because it's too political or you know, talking about COVID or something all the time, then go to the radio's website, ABC's website, and choose your interviews. I'm not endorsing anything anyone's saying. I'm just saying it's great to listen to conversational English or podcasts or TED Talks. Just remember that these people should be native speakers. And read lifestyle articles. Don't just read formal things. Read lifestyle articles, well-written ones, magazines or anything like that. Talk at a steady rate. Don't go too fast or too slow. Use the preparation minute to make notes. So for part 2, when you have a minute to prepare, 9 out of 10 times when someone says, it's okay, I don't need this minute, and they want to start, they mess it up. It helps to have notes. I have notes. I'm using these presentation notes and my own little notes down here, just so I can stay on track. Okay, use your noting time, your note-taking time. Use natural fillers like, now let me think, to avoid pauses. Avoid phrases such as, how do you say? That's not even a sentence. That's not even a sentence. Don't say, how do you say? And you'll pick this up the more you listen to conversational English, like talk shows or radio interviews. Okay, so get onto those. Don't sound flat. Use your stress and intonation. I don't want you to speak like this. Please tell us a story. Share the story with us, okay? Don't worry about a grammar mistake. Just move on, because more often than not, you know, you will probably, if you're going to worry about your grammar mistake and you worry about it so much that it could affect your fluency and then affect your rhythm and all that, and you might hit a blank and forget what you wanted to say, which would affect your ears. It's not worth it. Don't worry about the grammar. Just go on. Okay, just move. This is a speaking test. We'll worry more about the grammar and writing anyway. Okay, so just speak. You can really put all your eggs in the basket of the other parts, not the grammar. Now, masterclass, it's still study your grammar, but I mean, when you are doing speaking, don't get stuck on your mistakes. Remember to give more details about each of the points you make. Don't just go, yes, I like movies. Just tell us in part 1, yes, I like movies because they make me relaxed. Okay. Otherwise, we're going to sit there and go, why? Because we still have to fill the time. Explain your answers by giving reasons for what you say. Okay. We want to know why. This is a conversational English test. We need to see if you can express yourself. We need to see if you can deal with being an English-speaking country. Weigh up both sides of the question and give examples to support them, right? So especially in part 3, people may like, especially if you speak generally, people may like candy, but I can see why there are those who don't. Just give us all the options. Rehearse, work or study and where you live questions, but you have to sound natural. If you just rehearse it like a parrot, we will hear that and you won't sound natural. You still have to make it your own. All right. So give your opinion with, in my view, as far as I'm concerned, generally speaking, I'd say that those are great fillers as well. So use them. And then practice typical IELTS topics of education, health and fitness, travel and transport, leisure. So just read widely. Read as widely as you can. Read about current issues. That's the only way to prepare. Don't try and go and find out what people are asking and try to get something somewhere that you shouldn't be getting. Just think broadly, okay, and read widely, and that would help you. Okay, so there you go. Oh my goodness, what did I just do? Sorry. I just went into, okay, well, here we go. This is me and my technology. And I honestly don't really know how to get to the last slide. But basically, I was going to say thank you very much for coming today. You have your masterclass packs and you can read as widely as you want. I'm just scooting through this now because I was trying to get to the end slide. So ignore what you're seeing for now. But what I am going to say to you is thank you for coming. You can now, we're going to open the general questions. And remember, we have the services that we offer on coaching, which I do. You can present, you can book it through IDP, and we also have coaching and writing and all that. So yes. Okay, Sam, over to you. We are ready to take questions.
Spectacular.
Last slide.
Amazing. You got through that really quickly. You got through all these little rehash of all the slides. I think that's really fun.
It's clicking away.
It's great.
Okay.
Yeah, again, that was a spectacular webinar, Michelle. So thank you so much for all the brilliant insights and honestly, the incredible energy you bring, and for having a 2-for-2 streak of excellent webinars hosted or run with IDP. So thank you so much. We've had a lot of questions come in, which I think a lot of them are very interesting. So I hope you're ready to give some answers. Rochelle, are you ready to have questions? Amazing.
Yes, Sam, go for it.
Question 1, how can I speak fluent English in public without like fear or getting nervous? Do you have any advice for this?
Okay, so if you want to speak in public, I remember when I was learning German, that's my third language. I used to get really, really nervous about learning German because I learned that in South Africa and I learned that in my English and Afrikaans school. And when I went to Germany for a month, back in the 90s, people hardly spoke English in Germany. And I felt so embarrassed because everybody around me were native speakers. They spoke so fluently and so naturally. And I felt so broken in the way I spoke. But then people were very encouraging. They were very appreciative of me trying to speak that language. And I had no choice though. I really had to speak the language. And I thought I was doing terribly, but people liked me trying to speak their language. And obviously a lot of people are too polite to help. They feel they'll be rude if they interrupt you. So they'll just appreciate you doing that. And when I went back to South Africa in my German class, they asked me, well, can you please tell us how was your trip? And when I started speaking in German, people's mouths dropped open. And they couldn't believe how fluent I was as opposed to before I went. And I didn't realize that either until I spoke and the other students spoke as well. And I realized, oh my goodness, I've improved so much just by practicing the whole time. But you don't realize it when you're between all the people who speak English every day. So don't go too hard on yourself. Be less harder and less judgmental on yourself. And just use every opportunity you can, because I promise you people appreciate that. If there are people who don't appreciate that, those are the people you shouldn't care much about, okay? And they're not, the majority of people appreciate it a lot. So just try, just know that you're doing something really admirable.
That's really great advice. And I can tell you for a fact there's multiple comments in the Zoom and the Facebook Live saying they love your tone of voice and your accent and your fluency.
Thank you.
You've been very well received in all of those regards.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
Excellent advice. Question 2, I quite like this one. Is it more important to have an interesting story or the ability to develop the topic by using a range of topic-related vocabulary, even if it makes your story quite boring in speaking?
Oh, okay. Are you saying, can you just, okay, I'm just trying to wrap my head around
So it's a long
question.
The question is basically whether someone should have a really interesting story or they should use a lot of complex words, even if it makes their story quite boring, which would be marked better.
If you're going to use a lot of complex words, you're not going to sound very natural because you're going to overthink things, and we will hear that. So first go for the story that's at your heart, right? Like that you feel from the heart. That you go, your gut feeling. When you go, okay, I've got to share this thing with them, because it will make you a great storyteller, and your fluency would be woohoo, and your you know, just the tone, everything would be great, and your pronunciation would probably benefit from that. And who knows what will happen with the grammar? The grammar is always a wild card, isn't it? So with lexical resource, of course, with the vocabulary, you'll be able to stick to the topic, and you'll be able to give us, you know, we will know whether you can talk about familiar and unfamiliar topics. But don't panic too much, because the test is not just 2 minutes long or just that topic's length. We still going to talk to you afterwards, whether you can, to see if you can have that two-way conversation, and you'll have plenty of opportunity to, if you have listened to some expressions you liked, or saw some in some lifestyle articles, and have put, you know, you've put some of them in your pocket kind of to pull out later, that's fine. But you'll find that the more relaxed you are, the more this will come to you. Don't focus too much on impressing us. Focus more on sharing with us. That's what we're looking for. We want to see if we can deal with being in this country. And then those nicer, fancier words and things, they will come. That's why I said try to practice in your everyday life as well. When we learn a language, we've got our left brain and right brain, and the left brain is more the logical side, the reasoning side, and you basically use that for coherence, you know, to stick to the point, and grammatical structures. That's where that's the rest of language learning is on this side. Okay, my favorite side, the creative side, the musical side. This is the side that if you're completely stressed and you can't get into the flow, forget about it. You'll probably stuff up half of your exam. You must, that's why you must rather enjoy telling your story, sharing your story, than trying to focus on all, because most of language is on this side. I know I'm explaining this in a very abstract way, but it will benefit you if you focus more on going into the flow.
I think that was the perfect answer. I think you kept that really interesting and natural,
so.
In the sense that you probably should for a speaking test answer, just straightforward, natural, interesting, perfect answer. I think this next question is a little bit more straightforward, I hope. Am I allowed to go off topic in speaking part 2, or will I lose marks for this?
Okay. So look, so you get your topic, right? And a question I get sometimes is, look, you've got to stay coherent. You've got to stick to the topic. You've got to make sure if you go off topic, you've got to explain to us why. We need to know why. So if you get a topic, for example, let's say you don't know what on earth, you don't really know where to go with this. So we say, can you tell us about a book you've read? This is my favorite example. So sorry if you've heard this before. Tell us about a book you've read that you would like to read again. And you go, oh my goodness, I don't really read books, but we can't change your topic. We've tested these topics on so many different people. It's very general. You can do something with it. So if you go, okay, right, so I don't read because my grandma used to chase me around the house and hit me over the head with a book. Okay, so if you see a book, you tremble. So you can do one of three things. The first option is the worst option, and that's lying. Okay, so that is basically just making up some story. But the problem is, if we ask you follow-up questions, more often than not, people just the answers do not coincide. They just don't make sense when it comes to the actual story they told us. So we always say, look, you're already stressed, and now you want to remember this lie you just made up. Rather steer away from that, because, you know, so rather don't lie. Rather either go for option 2 or 3. So 2, you can just tell the absolute truth. And that may mean, if you have that card that we gave you to speak from, because you'll have a topic with the bullet points, then it may mean you may not be able to stick to all those bullet points. And that is okay, as long as you explain it. So you will maybe go, okay, so you asked me to talk about a book I've read that I would like to read again. But to be honest with you, I don't read because when I see a book, I tremble. And then tell us why. tell us about this grandmother that used to chase you around the house. Now, the problem with, so that means you'll probably not cover all those points, which is okay. In writing, it's super important, but we give you this speaking card to help you, to give you ideas, but we're not staring at the card. We know what the topic is, but we just want to see how will you deal with this topic. You're in this English-speaking country, how will you deal with people ask you things? So if it's if you want to explain to us what the problem is there, you can. But the problem again with part 2, with the second option, you can get emotional. You can start crying. It might be a traumatic story or very dark. And then we are trained to deal with this, or the examiners are trained to deal with situations like that. But you, the test taker, may not be trained to deal with this in a stressful situation, and then you may not be able to continue your test. So you may want to go for option 3 if that's the case. And option 3 is sort of touch on a topic but then relate something else to it. So you can go, okay, I don't read because books freak me out. I tremble when I see them, and it's all my grandmother's fault. I can't go into it because then I won't be able to do this exam. So what I will do for you is I'll tell you about a movie I've seen that's been based on the book that I would like to see again. And this movie is Harry Potter. And then we don't just start talking about the movie, at least tell us why you're doing this, so we have some context. But that means you probably won't follow the exact points. What book was it? When was the first? But so you won't follow the exact points. That's what I mean with yes, you can steer away from it, but you must provide us with context. This is a conversational text, because if you go too far away and we can sort of figure out it's a rehearsed topic here that you were trying to sort of squeeze out of this thing, we will you will meet your maker in part 3, because that's where we really test it in that way. So just try to stay as honest as you can.
Cool. Honesty is the best
question?
policy.
Yes.
I think that answers the question perfectly. And honesty is always the best policy, I think, is important, especially for an IELTS test.
Yes.
I think we have 2 questions.
As private as you want to be. Sorry, Sam. If you want to be private about certain things, you can, but please just give us some sort of context and still volunteer some sort of information then that's related to, if we ask you about birds, please don't go and talk about spaceships or something else, unless you can relate them.
Yep. Yeah. If someone could relate birds to spaceships, I'd be impressed, I think. We have 2 questions left, if that's okay. This one should be quite straightforward, I think.
Yeah.
Are dress code and eye contact considered during the marking process?
Okay. Well, look, how would you dress for, again, when I said this is an international test, so you want to think about what's appropriate for 16-year-olds to 90-year-olds. We don't, so we can't judge you on dress code. This is not a dress test. This is more about respect. But whether you come naked to the test, which they won't allow you to, but if you do, no one's going to say anything. We can't score you on that. It's not about that. We don't care what you look like. Eye contact does help with communication. So if you look this way and that way or whatever, unless you have sight issues, medically speaking, we understand why you can't look at us. But otherwise, it's actually part of communication. But if you have this tendency not to look at us, but you're making complete sense and your story makes, we can follow you okay, and it's not distracting, that's fine, I guess, so it's more about the way you use your English and the way you yes, it's a standardized test. It's applied all over the world in the same way. So some parts of the world that got different dress codes. You can just wear your you can go in bare feet, with no shoes on, I guess, in some places, and yes, it doesn't matter. And in some places, you have to cover up more, and some places you have to cover up less. It depends where you are. But that's not our job to judge you on any of that. It's how
Perfect.
comfortable you are when you do the test. You don't want to sit there and try to make sure something is where it should be. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now imagine after all these Zoom calls over the years, like I'm used to seeing people like not quite looking at me, looking at a screen instead. I think that's changed eye contact forever.
It has. I know, I was trying to look at the little camera up there, but
I always do
so
as
many other
well.
things happening.
Last question for the night, this one. We have a test taker whose test is first thing tomorrow morning. They want to know if you have any last minute tips for them on IELTS speaking.
Yes. So look, just go in there, be a great storyteller, just stick to the point. And that's what we want. You're allowed to take a bottle of water with you into the test room. I still believe that's okay in Melbourne as well, as long as you can close it. And when you take that in with you, pretend that's your beverage of choice at a dinner party, and pretend you're at this dinner party. And that sort of helps you to relax a bit more. And also don't be distracted by the way the examiner may look at you while you're speaking. As I mentioned before, we're not judging you. We're focusing, we're over concentrating, right? So some of us don't have the best listening faces, and we are never ever judging you. We're literally trying to look for the best parts of your language. So if you just be like a bird that's flying. If you do think, oh my goodness, I've just messed this part up, if a little rock comes your way and you're fluttering all over, just carry on flying, okay? Don't just give up and fall. Just go, okay, there was a little rock. I'm flying on, I'm going on. I just want to stay in the air. Keep doing that.
Perfect advice. I think that's a really fun answer for the final question. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. And we actually have some feedback here from, I think it was Facebook, that says, thank you so much. This was very useful. I was really nervous about the speaking test, but now I feel very confident. So I think you've just instilled many test takers with some confidence with this webinar.
We just want to see how you'll be in an everyday situation. This test is literally to see how will you deal with everyday situations in English, because we want to make sure you'll be okay in your English speaking country. I mean, I'm from South Africa. We have 11 official languages there, right? And English is one of them. So these top 5 English speaking countries like Australia, New Zealand, UK, US, Canada, they don't look at our country like we're an English speaking country, really. They're going, oh, can I actually speak English there? Well, am I going to faint when I have to speak English in this different country? So that's why we need to test so many different people in so many different scenarios, just to see, will you be okay? Will you be able to ask for help and get help in this country where you'll most likely be far away from family and friends? So this test is actually also to protect you, not just the country.
Great advice to wrap up, I think. That is all the questions we have time for tonight. Rochelle, thank you so much for joining us to share your extensive knowledge, and also for all the brilliant answers you provided over the last, I think, 15 to 20 minutes. A further thank you to everyone who tuned in for being with us tonight, and a huge shout out to our team behind the scenes for making this all possible. If you're looking for more IELTS preparation material, make sure to head to our website, which is ielts.idp.com. And we also really recommend checking out our new Prepare Hub, which you can find on the website, as well as the webinar registration page, where you can register for more of our upcoming webinars. Next fortnight, we'll be speaking with Rose from Macquarie University, who is an experienced English language teacher, an IELTS preparation expert. So look forward to that. Additionally, we'd recommend checking out our social channels if you'd like day-to-day IELTS and English language updates and prep content, or just to have a chat to us personally, where you can inquire about just general customer support things. These channels are IELTS Essentials from IDP on Facebook, IELTS.Essentials on Instagram, and IELTS by IDP on YouTube, and also IELTS just at IELTS on TikTok. That's it from me. Thank you, Jimmy. Yeah, true.
And the progress checks as well.
Yeah, no, progress check is brilliant. There's so many things available on the website. Yeah, thank you so much, Rochelle. Do you have any parting words at all?
No, just stay safe, everyone. And thank you for tuning in. And we just hope, we basically just want to help you get through this. So yeah, good luck.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Have a wonderful evening, Rochelle.
Thank you, Sam. Goodbye.